Directed by Peter Deek, we are talking Silent Zone, and this is a 2025 action horror zombie movie. So the story starts off with the beginnings of a zombie outbreak, and we see this family try to escape the carnage, but they are all killed apart from one little girl who is around 7 or 8. And she is saved by what we presume is some type of service personnel, maybe a cop, ex-military, something like that. Then we cut to 10 years later, and these two are effectively survivalists on the road. And these are our two main characters, Abigail and Cassius. Now, Abigail is older, she's a teenager, and Cassius has been kind of teaching her various survival techniques, combat, all of that, hunting. And it follows these two characters as they traverse this landscape, meeting various other sort of surviving human characters, some of which are friendly, some of which aren't. And of course being attacked by various kind of what they call ferals, which are the kind of the zombies from this universe. Now these ferals are more like the kind of the 28 Days Later style infected. It's not clear whether they're actually undead. It doesn't appear so. It does appear that they're more like sorts of infected humans, and they have a degree of intelligence. I would probably cast them along the same kind of intelligence level as like a pack of like wild dogs, for example. And then yeah, it follows this inevitably to a big clash towards the end. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's talk about it. Now, this movie was filmed in Hungary, and I think it has a lot of cast and crew from that area, although it is spoken in English. I get the impression, although I couldn't find out for sure, what this seems to be ADR'd, but at least I think it was performed in English, but possibly touched up in post with ADR. So what works in this movie's favour? Now, it's a lower budget film, for sure, but I have to say I was quite impressed with the scale here. There is a lot of extras in this movie. You know, we got big hordes of kind of like zombies, lots of kind of human sort of characters, and the finale's got quite a large kind of like set piece there. It involves all these kind of like sort of docked boats and things, like large kind of like carrier ships and stuff. So I gotta say, I think the production value here, possibly this is why it was filmed in Hungary, to, you know, get the most bang for your buck, so to speak, but it certainly, I think, translates to a solid looking movie in regards to you know, set pieces, production, number of kind of cast, location shooting. So I think it looks quite slick for a movie. I have to say I really enjoyed our two central characters. Now the acting is a little questionable overall, but I think our main two characters do a decent enough job, at least conveying these somewhat sort of broad characters, but nonetheless you do feel a good sense of connection there. And I think the movie is really trying to, you know, show your family is what you make it. It might not be necessarily the ones that you're born with, but the family is the people that will be there and support you ultimately, which is kind of the message as the sort of the film sort of goes on. So that I kind of quite liked. There is lots of interesting zombie lore here. We have a character which has made a kind of device to quasi-control them. And they, as they say, they do have these ferals, as they're called in this movie, have a degree of intelligence and are quite sort of physically sort of fit and can, you know, throw down, and it almost seems superhuman in some instances where they're kind of jumping large distances and stuff like that. So they do seem genuinely kind of dangerous. The makeup, because we're not talking about decomposed humans, we're talking like infected, you know, the makeup isn't like skeletal and things like that. It's more just kind of cuts and pustules and kind of like contacts and stuff, but it might not be as extravagant as, you know, half decomposed corpses, but I think it works well in the context of this movie because you're not looking at, you know, ropey looking kind of dialogue, ropey looking VFX, because it fits within the kind of the context of this movie. This is very action heavy. You know, there's lots of kind of like action sequences. In actual fact, you may even argue this is more of an action film than a horror. There is a little bit of kind of blood splatter and stuff, but it's not a particularly kind of gory movie. But it is quite violent in regards to, you know, shootouts, fist fights, various kind of like shots to the head and things like that. So it's certainly an action-packed movie in that regards. And you know, I think for the most part, the action is kind of fairly well choreographed here. And as I say, you know, when you consider it's probably a lower budget movie, you know, it's done to a sort of a fairly good standard. The story is nothing complex. We're going to talk about that again in a minute. But I think it's one of these films which is easy to follow. You can just kind of put it on and almost half pay attention to it for the most part, and you're going to get the gist. It's not going to lose you. The characters are quite broad and sort of like easy to identify their sort of their character traits, if you like. You know, it's not going to kind of insult your brain matter too much, but ultimately it is a little bit of a kind of a dumb fun movie in that respect, which brings me on to what doesn't work. I mean, story-wise, I mean, this movie, you can kind of pick holes in regards to some of the kind of the decisions that are made here, and I'll give you a couple, but I want to try and avoid spoilers, so I certainly won't be going into everything. But it's a very kind of like, I guess, like I say, a fun but very dumb film. For example, our main two characters, we led to believe that they've been in this world now for 10 years, and these feral zombies, we call them that, it's established that they are transmitted through bites, but they're wearing no protection on their arms. They're just wearing their arms out, you know, they're not like taped up or armoured. They're just wearing like bulletproof vests, and then their arms are out kind of like with no protection. And thinking, well, if you're going to get attacked, you know, that's the thing you're going to be putting up. Why wouldn't you sort of like cover your arms? That is one minor nitpicky thing. But it will give you an idea here of some of the kind of the cheesiness that is on display. And this movie is a little bit cheesy. We meet a character, a human character, who at one point seems pretty friendly, and he looks all friendly. And then it turns out he might actually be a bad guy. When his bad guy turn, when his heel turn happens, all of a sudden he's got like really like sunken line. He's not a zombie. He's just got like really like black rings under his eyes to make his eyes look sort of like more evil looking. And I thought, well, how has that just happened? You know, he didn't look like that 5 minutes ago. Why, when he had his heel turn, all of a sudden he's got these like massive like goth looking kind of like black eyes and stuff? Just doesn't make sense. I mean, these infected, how they've been surviving, if they're not zombies, it doesn't really give you kind of much context in regards to this world. I mean, it's about 2 hours long, so it's a reasonably long film, but I feel this movie was just lacking some sort of like context. It is quite cheesy. I mean, there's plenty of dumb stuff in this movie. Again, I don't want to go through necessarily lots of plot points, but I've given you some examples of what you can expect. There are plenty more. Yeah, so it's maybe not the most cerebral of zombie films out there. The acting is not great. Some fare better than others. As I say, luckily our two central characters, I think fare okay, but a lot of the supporting characters, not all, but a lot, are on the kind of the cheesier side. Now, I'm not sure if this was ADR, post-ADR sort of layers that have made it sound quite artificial, or whether it was just the kind of the performances on the day. But yeah, there's some hokey, or a lot of the kind of the cast are from Hungary. Maybe they're not, they're acting in English and it's not their first language, and ultimately that kind of level of awkwardness kind of shows through on the kind of the film. Some of the kind of not just the kind of dumb sort of little things in the movie, but there are some kind of like plot issues. The plot is relatively slight, but there are some kind of like things here, like a guy who is bitten and knowingly bitten, and you know he's kind of trying to kind of hide the fact. And like, well, why would you? You know, I mean, it's one of those typical things that you sort of see in zombie films. And even when he's found out, I think that how that plays out is, I don't know if that would, you know, would really be kind of like how people would react. And I think the even though this movie is relatively long, the end seems a little truncated to me, as in the climax of this kind of movie. I've got to tell you one thing as well. I mean, this again, we learn this is possibly the dumbest thing. So I'm just going to tell you, it's not really a spoiler. So our Cassius picks up Abigail when she's around 7, something like that. It doesn't specifically say. And then he's with her for 10 years, and so she would be about 17 in at this point in the movie. And it turns out that her natural-born father had a private plane, and somehow she knows how to fly it. But the last times that would have happened she would have been at the oldest 7. So you're telling me that she learnt to fly a plane when she was 7 or younger, and 10 years on she can still fly a plane? I mean, like, come on. I mean, come on. So you can watch this movie and you can enjoy it for a simple zombie action movie with lots of whiz-bangs, you know, heroic good characters, boo-hiss bad characters. We even get a kind of like King Zombie type. And there's lots of set pieces, but my God, this movie is on the dumb side. I will give it a 6 out of 10 because I do think it has entertainment value. But your IQ might drop a few points after watching this one. Have you seen it? What did you think? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.